Hi, I'm Van the Funeral Man. You know, over the 30 years of pastoring, there's been a question that I received again and again from parents. It sounded something like this: should I take my 4-year-old or my 5-year-old to a funeral? Now, first answer would be, look, you know your child much better than I do. However, I do think there's some things I'd like to suggest in helping you make that decision. First, make a distinction. For example, is the deceased a family member or is it just a friend? That will make a huge difference. For example, my advice might differ if the deceased is a family member versus just a friend. I was roughly 3 years old, maybe 4 years old, when my grandfather on my mother's side died. Now, I don't remember a thing about it, but I was told later in life that I was at the funeral home. Now, I'm so glad that I was, even though I don't remember a thing. I was glad, and I think you would be glad, and maybe your child will be glad later in life to know that they were there for an important family member. So the next distinction I would make is this: there's a difference between attending a visitation versus attending a funeral service. See, a visitation for the most part is much less formal than a funeral is. Most of the time, the emotions are less charged at the visitation. So attending the visitation might be the better option if you have to choose between the two. Funeral services are highly charged events, especially when the music begins. Wow, it changes incredibly when the music begins, I can promise you that. And bringing young children without preparing the grieving family can cause much undue stress for both them and for you. Having officiated hundreds of funerals, I can tell you this: there are children that I wish would have been left at home. Parents will often let their children cry through the entire service and then at the very end take them out. I've even had a situation where I was officiating a service and the children were running, making circles around my legs. It was just so incredibly disrespectful to the grieving family. So here's my advice: at least do this. If you're going to bring your children, speak to the grieving family first. This allows them to decide if this is the right environment, and it helps to ensure that the focus remains on the deceased and honoring that person. Also, explain to your kids as best you can, as best they can understand, what to expect at the service. Even then, let me just plainly say, it can be extremely unsettling for children. It can be unsettling for adults when they are in a situation where people are crying and sometimes even wailing out loud. It can be extremely upsetting. So you're asking the right question: should I bring my 4-year-old or my 5-year-old to a funeral service? You're asking the right question, but I have a better question, even more important question. Have you talked to your children about death? In the upcoming videos, I want to talk a little bit about that, because talking about that subject with your children is going to be important. If you haven't done it already, you should be thinking about that, and I can help you do that. Now, if you've liked this video, if you found it helpful in any way, and also if you have some ideas about bringing children to a funeral service, I'd love to have your comments. So if you put them down in the comments section. Also, if you consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel, that would be great. I'd appreciate it. I'm Van the Funeral Man, living with hope in life and in death.